In this lesson, we're going to talk about Unicode and emoji, and the purpose of this is to represent all of the symbols and the numbers that we might want to use when we're using computers or doing computing. And so, jumping into that, what we're going to start with, we're just going to do a brief kind of historical lesson. If you remember, in the previous lessons, we talked about how we can represent any number that we could possibly want to in base 2. And so what we know now is we can deal with any numbers. And so the trick is sometimes we want to deal with letters or symbols or things like that. And so this is kind of what led to ASCII, which is kind of the first idea of this that was formalized that we kind of still use. And this is just shorthand for the American Standard Code for information interchanges. And so ASCII is 128 characters. So it's not a huge space, but it contains basically the entire Latin alphabet, so what we're used to using, and then some symbols. And if you want to see kind of example of this, you can see that we've got the number here on the left, and they've expressed it in binary, octal, decimal, and in hexadecimal. So basically in ASCII, the character that is 0100000 is a space. So the computer knows if it sees that number 0100000, that means it should be a space. So like, an empty space, like when you hit the space bar. Likewise, if you have 010 and 0100010, then the computer knows that it's, your quotation marks. This is great because it means we can represent a whole bunch of stuff, but the problem is if it's just the Latin alphabet and some symbols, there's a lot of things that we can't do. Like you can't type, the special Turkish letters that are in the Turkish alphabet. You can't type languages that use other scripts, like you can't type Arabic, you can't type Korean, you can't type Chinese, etc. So we look to expand that with Unicode. And so this is maintained by the Unicode Consortium, which is a group that just kind of standardizes and agrees, like, here's what the number is, here's what the symbol should be. Now, Unicode is much, much bigger than ASCII. And so Unicode 14, which is the current version that we're on, contains 144,697 characters / symbols, because we'll see it also includes emoji and things like that. The most that they can possibly, or they've said that they could possibly ever have based on the current formatting, is 1,112,064 characters. So we've got a lot more space and we can include a lot more things than ASCII did. And so it's just a bunch of numbers that say this number means this symbol or this character. And so it has everything in ASCII, and it has basically the goal is any written language that has characters or letters, that those will be able to be represented in Unicode. Most of them are already there, but just every iteration, they add some more once they've kind of standardized it for more and more, or for less and less frequently used languages. So let's look at a couple examples here. Oh, go back. So you can see that we've got a number here on the left. Don't worry about the U plus for now. That's just the way that we say this is a Unicode character. And you'll look at this and you'll think, oh, it doesn't look like there's that much number. Like, these are pretty small numbers, 24, 25. But these are all hexadecimal numbers, which I think we'll see in a minute some examples of that. So these are all hexadecimal, which means each of these these digits are powers of 16. So in other words, that's why down here we've got 16 to the 4th power things that we can represent. So you can see here, same as before, we've got our space, our exclamation mark, our quotation mark, number sign. It starts out in this region with, like we said, ASCII. You also see we've got alternate scripts, and you've got emoji. And here's where you can see some of those hexadecimal values. So for example, in this first row, you've got an F in here. And then you'll notice that this X, all that means is because writing in a table lets us save space. So if it's 1F600, it's this smiling face. If it's 1F601, it's this smiling face. If it's 1F60E, it's the sunglasses. And so you'll see here, you've got that extra letters to get out to hexadecimal. So that brings us to emoji, which are just a special subset of the of the Unicode space. So it is part of Unicode, but the thing is, these are characters that are meant to be displayed as small images. So whereas a question mark, we generally think of as a symbol, and there's some that are kind of on the border, right? Like a smiling face, might be a symbol, might be a picture, but as you've all used phones or emoji, and you know that they're much more pictographic in the representation. You've also probably seen that recently. I believe this was about 4 or 5, off the top of my head, somewhere in that region, around 4 versions ago, so around 4 years ago, emoji were introduced and used that can be adjusting others. And they use this little bit in here. You don't need to know most of this, but if you're curious how it works, they use this little zwidge character, or a zero width joiner, and certain combinations, your computer, your phone, or whatever is looking at the Unicode knows to combine them. So for example, if you combine 3 people, it's like man plus woman plus boy, they display that as the family. If you combine a waving flag with a rainbow, you get the rainbow flag. If you combine man with red hair, you get the man with red hair. If you combine woman with red hair, you get a woman with red hair, etc., etc. So these are recently introduced, and they also have, for example, the skin tone types in there as well. So in theory, these could be added to any emoji, but the computer will only look at to combine some, right? For example, flag with a skin tone color, your computer is going to say this is nonsense, and it will likely just ignore the latter parts. But what's kind of neat about this, if you know these combinations, you could actually enter these manually to create the combination emoji on the right here. Now, that won't necessarily work using your keyboard, because your keyboard's meant to just look up and not have any of these Unicode available for you, but that is what you can be aware of. The last thing to say about emoji that you probably already know from experience, and you can kind of see from here, is the emoji is technically defined as this text right here. And then it's up to the manufacturer or whatever company is designing the operating system or the application to decide how they want those emoji to appear. And so this is why if you're on an iPhone, the emoji look different than they do on Android, because the 2 companies have decided here's what we want those to look like. So if you want to learn some more or check out some references, these are the 3 that I would recommend. Wikipedia's information on this is pretty accessible and easy to kind of track. There's also Emojipedia, which is like a Wikipedia, but just for emoji. So they have basically a page for each of the emoji, description of what it is, what it looks like on all the major operating systems and platforms, some brief history, stuff like that. And then lastly, you can check out the Unicode Consortium website. There's some cool things on there, like they talk about what emoji are under consideration to be added each year. They talk a bit about their process. They do analysis every year, so you can go there and see what emoji has been used most frequently in the last year or the last 6 months, stuff like that. So yeah, check these out, and that should help you learn some more.